until the philosophers assume the role of kings and the rulers of this world embrace the spirit and authority of philosophy, and until political greatness and wisdom are united in one individual, cities will never escape from turmoil, nor, as I believe, will the human race. And only then will our state have a chance to survive and see the light of day. The essence of the matter is that the best governed state is one where the rulers are most reluctant to wield power, and conversely, the worst governed state is one where the rulers are most eager to govern. This is the view expressed by Plato in his Republic, where he sets forth the conditions, which even he regards as nearly unattainable, under which a state might be governed wisely. The ruler, he asserts, must be both a philosopher and a king, and he must govern with reluctance, preferring philosophy to power. Historically, there was a time when these conditions were realized. Marcus Aurelius embodies the philosopher-king, a ruler who valued the solitude of a scholar more than the grandeur of the palace, and preferred the peaceful arts to the glory of warfare. With great interest, we examine historical records to understand the outward life of this king. However, we are even more eager to delve into the precious record of his personal thoughts, which reveal the inner life of the philosopher. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus was the adopted son of Emperor Antoninus Pius, who passed away in 161 AD. Raised with the utmost care by his adoptive father, he received the finest education in poetry and rhetoric, the cornerstones of a liberal education at that time. However, his true passion lay in philosophy. At the age of 11, he donned the simple attire of philosophers and embraced their way of life. Discovering his strong inclination toward Stoicism, he aligned himself with this strictest of philosophical schools. The Stoic discipline, marked by its monastic rigor, which demanded disregard for bodily comforts and pleasures and a focus solely on virtue, was a peculiar preparation for someone destined for imperial authority. It seemed an unlikely training for managing the vast Roman Empire of that era. Although the Stoics claimed to be citizens of the world and promoted a cosmopolitanism that transcended mere patriotism, in practice their philosophy often made active participation in politics unadvisable. Nonetheless, Marcus Aurelius had no choice in his destiny. Already chosen for the throne by Emperor Hadrian, and associated with the empire even during his adoptive father's reign, he had to accept his role. By striving to embody the noble principles he had been taught, he paid the highest tribute to his Stoic mentors. His reign was marked by considerable challenges. The Roman Empire, which had been gradually expanding its borders during the vigorous days of the Republic, had been consolidated and re-administered by Julius Caesar and Augustus. Upon Augustus's death, the empire stretched from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the Armenian mountains and Arabian deserts in the east. To the south, the African deserts halted the expansion, while to the north, natural boundaries were defined by the English Channel, Rhine, Danube, Black Sea, and Mount Caucasus. Augustus had cautioned his successors to focus on preserving rather than expanding their territories, following the setbacks experienced by his generals on the Lower Rhine. Thus, between 14 and 161 AD, when Marcus Aurelius ascended the throne, only two new conquests had been made: Britain, which proved more troublesome than profitable, and Dacia, conquered by Trajan in 106 AD. The natural boundaries and Roman legions maintained peace and security within the empire for many years. However, two critical vulnerabilities existed on the empire's borders. To the north, the resilient Germanic tribes along the Danube and Upper Rhine, pressed by Slavonic invaders from Russia, posed a threat to the Roman dominion. To the east, the insolent Parthian, a long-standing menace to Roman military forces, remained a persistent source of conflict and peril. The peace-loving Marcus Aurelius was compelled to confront both threats. The army of the profligate Lucius Verus temporarily subdued the Parthians, but lasting peace eluded Marcus Aurelius. He personally led campaigns along the Danube, repeatedly repelling the northern adversaries in wars, of which the primary interest for us today lies in the sparse notes in the Meditations, this among the Quadi, this at Carnuntum, illustrating how these invaluable records of a serene and virtuous soul were crafted amid the turmoil of battle and the thrill of victory. His troubles extended beyond foreign wars. A plague, introduced from the east, devastated Italy, though it inadvertently benefited the state by removing Lucius Verus, Marcus's adoptive brother, whom he had shared the empire with in accordance with Antoninus's wishes. Italy also faced famines, which the emperor attempted to address through meticulously organized charitable schemes. Additionally, Avidius Cassius, one of his most trusted and capable generals, rebelled in Syria, seeking to seize the empire for himself, believing it an easy task to overcome a ruler known for his generosity and compassion, which he saw as weaknesses. The revolt was quickly quelled, but Cassius was killed by one of his own officers. The emperor expressed only regret at being deprived of the opportunity to forgive Cassius and meticulously destroyed all documents that could implicate others in the revolt. Throughout his life's trials, Marcus Aurelius's philosophy inspired noble actions, earning him a rightful place among those whom the Stoics would consider truly good and great. Yet, amid his records of kindness and tolerance, it is paradoxical to note that Marcus Aurelius sanctioned a brutal persecution of Christians. Among the victims were Justin Martyr and Polycarp, and many others suffered in a widespread persecution of the churches at Lyons and Vienne. It is important to recognize that the persecution was driven more by political motives than religious ones. Marcus Aurelius was largely indifferent to Christian teachings, caring little for the new faith, but viewed its followers as rebels against the established order due to their refusal to acknowledge the emperors as deities. In a state where the Senate had the authority to add new gods to the already confusing list, genuine belief in the old Roman gods had almost vanished. Consequently, outward rituals became more significant, as the church could no longer stand independently. Of the philosophical systems popular in Rome at the time, all but Epicureanism could easily accommodate the traditional religion, treating the gods and heroes as mere symbols while maintaining outward conformity with inner enlightenment. The Christians, however, rejected the entire system of idolatry. Their silent protests were insufficient. They not only refrained from sacrifices but actively denounced and vandalized the statues of gods, provoking the ire of the Romans who suspected and despised them. The Christians' secret meetings only fueled more bizarre rumors, and the persecutions were a manifestation of the state's reaction to a group seen as both unconventional and subversive. Adding to this was the fact that Christians often provoked persecution themselves, making it less surprising, though regrettable, that Marcus Aurelius, by merely allowing the law to take its course, failed to model the perfect tolerance that Christianity itself has yet to achieve. We should recognize him, with Farrar, as the noblest of pagan emperors, and mournfully accept that we may never find a Christian monarch to rival him. Marcus Aurelius's life was marked by continual wars and troubles until his death. In 177 AD, he faced new conflicts in the north. His friends in Rome, sensing they might never see him again, urged him to give them his final advice. It is striking that, before departing for war, he spent 3 days discoursing on profound philosophical issues. This was indeed the last time he was seen in Rome. Exhausted by anxiety and fatigue, after achieving another victory for Roman arms, he died in Pannonia on March 17, 180 AD, mourned with an unprecedented depth of sorrow at the death of an emperor. It is time to explore the nature of the philosophy that exerted such practical influence. Despite its origins, marked by distinct materialism and impractical ethics, the Stoic philosophy, founded by Zeno in Athens around 290 BC, did not immediately suggest the impact it would have. During this period, Greek philosophy, which had previously enjoyed a brief idealistic phase under Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, was returning to a materialistic approach, with new philosophical systems looking back to pre-Socratic thinkers for a foundational theory of the universe. Metaphysical inquiries had lost their allure. It was now practical ethics, a guide to living and behavior, that philosophy aimed to provide. Although these later schools based their ethics on natural science, they preferred to return to the ancient thinkers for a system, rather than pursuing their own scientific investigations. During this period, the two dominant schools, were the Stoic and Epicurean. The Epicureans looked to Democritus's atomic theory for an understanding of the universe, while the Stoics turned to Heraclitus's concept of perpetual flux, the eternal, ever-changing fire. Initially, before heaven and earth existed, there was a primal fiery ether. This ether transforms into all other elements but maintains its fiery essence. First, it becomes a mass of vapor, then a watery fluid. From this, the four elements are formed: water, solid earth, atmospheric air, and finally, destructive fire, which differs from the eternal ether. Fire and air are active elements. Water and earth are passive. Creation starts to take shape with earth. Due to its weight, dry earth settles at the center of the cosmos, surrounded by waters, with air above both, while fire and ether complete the whole, continuously circling the stationary elements. Stars are fiery bodies embedded in ether, nourished by the vaporous exhalations from the earth. They are also considered living entities, formed from animating fire, and thus can be viewed as lesser or visible gods. The sun and the celestial deities too have their assigned roles, notes Marcus Aurelius. The Stoics claim that the world is perfect and must have been created by a rational designer. Thus, the highest reason is inherent in the world, and should be seen as self-aware and personal. After all, it created man, who is self-aware and personal, and can the created be greater than the creator? Yet paradoxically, the Stoic God is not a person but the fiery ether that permeates all things. This fiery essence of matter is its soul. The soul of the universe, which binds everything together under one fixed law, is God himself. In one sense, the deity is merely a fiery air current. In another, he is Zeus, the wise, almost personal ruler of the universe. Both aspects are present in Marcus Aurelius, but he emphasizes the simpler ethical teachings and the gentle encouragement towards virtuous living, rather than delving into intricate speculations about the origins of things. His descriptions of God evoke the omnipotent and omniscient deity of monotheism. The Stoics traced all things back to formless matter and the vital, animating ether. Matter was eternal by nature, given that the underlying fire was imperishable. However, everything was gradually being consumed, and at the end of a set period, there would be a universal conflagration, with all things reabsorbed into the deity. Afterward, everything would be recreated, and a new cycle would begin. The world's great age begins anew. The golden days return. The earth doth like a snake renew her winter weeds outworn, sings Shelley. However, the Stoics anticipated no brighter Hellas or fairer Tempe. The new cycle would replicate the old one. Another Socrates would emerge, destined to marry another Xanthippe, endure the same harsh treatment, face accusations from Anytus and Meletus, deliver his renowned defense, and drink the cup of hemlock amidst his sorrowful disciples. Such a vision of the universe was accepted by all Stoics, but later followers attached little importance to it, except as it highlighted the close connection between humanity, the deity, and each other. They believed the soul was material and spatially extended. It is the fiery current that permeates and maintains the body. They viewed it as the guiding or dominant principle, the eternal divine spark. This reasoning element establishes the bond between God, the universal reason, and man who possesses a small portion of it. The brotherhood of mankind is sustained by a kinship of mind and reason rather than mere physical connections. Though we are not of the same flesh and blood, our minds are closely related. Did the Stoics believe in an afterlife? It is difficult to say. Unlike the Epicureans, who vehemently denied it, asserting that only annihilation could alleviate the fears of death, the Stoics accepted that the individual soul must eventually merge with the universal soul. Whether this integration occurred immediately or only after the next cosmic conflagration was a matter of debate among authorities. In any case, the soul must eventually return to the deity from which it originated. This connection to the deity is central to Stoic ethics. According to their philosophy, man's true good lies in aligning with the deity. Since God and reason are synonymous, living in harmony with reason is seen as the best fit for the soul's nature. Thus, such a life must be virtuous. Consequently, virtue is considered the highest good, and happiness is found in virtue. This leads the Stoics to their core belief. Virtue alone is admirable and completely self-sufficient. The virtuous person requires no external support. Neither illness nor misfortune can affect them. They are a king, a god among men. Anything deemed good that is not moral goodness falls into the category of intermediates, neither wholly good nor bad. Such absolute claims about virtue were unprecedented. Unlike Aristotle, who allowed for sufficient external conditions to enable a focus on thought and virtue, the Stoics demanded pure virtue alone. A virtuous person could be a slave, suffer from disease or poverty, or lose all they hold dear, yet they would remain entirely and wholly happy. Virtue was indivisible. Anyone not virtuous was deemed vicious, with no middle ground. This rigid doctrine struggled to align with reality. We know that people are not simply virtuous or vicious, but possess a mix of good and evil, with most desiring what is right and failing due to weakness rather than moral failing. The Stoics, who demanded absolute virtue and disregard for external conditions, had to acknowledge that truly wise individuals were rare and the foolish numerous. When pressed to name their wise individuals, they listed Hercules, Odysseus, Socrates, the Cynics Antisthenes, and Diogenes, and later, Cato the Younger, the only Stoic among them. This limited list seems to condemn Stoicism in its early form. However, Stoicism was not destined to remain static. As Capes notes in his handbook, it was tempered by concessions to common sense. The paradoxes of the wise man were borrowed from cynicism, seen by the Stoics as a counsel of perfection. Diogenes's eccentricities, like demanding Alexander move out of his sunlight, might have been surprising, but a movement advocating such extremes would have been regressive. Later Christian hermits, while perhaps saving their own souls, did not influence the masses as much as a virtuous life lived among them. Stoicism, like Christianity, had to become practical and relatable. The doctrine of absolute good and evil was revised. Virtue remained the only true good, and vice the only real evil, but now they also recognized things to be preferred and things to be avoided. Health, reputation, and other benefits, previously dismissed as indifferent, were now acknowledged. While the ideal of the unattainable wise man persisted, it was accepted that good people with high aspirations could live among others as equals. This adjustment bridged the gap between the sage and the fool, allowing Stoicism to accommodate real human experiences. These practical adaptations coincided with Stoicism's introduction to Rome, a nation known for its practicality. Romans, a practical people of soldiers and lawyers, adapted Greek culture to their needs. They also incorporated Greek philosophy. As Greece was subdued, Rome recognized the value in Greek ideas beyond just art. Some Romans studied philosophy in Athens, while others brought great Greek teachers to Rome. By the 1st century BC, all Greek philosophical schools were present in Rome, with Stoicism gaining the most followers. Its principles of simplicity, resilience, and serenity amidst chaos resonated with earnest republicans witnessing their aspirations for liberty eroding before the rise of monarchy. The Stoic view that suicide could be honorable when faced with insurmountable troubles offered a form of escape from an inevitable tyranny they could not prevent. Cato chose to end his own life when the Republic fell, and Stoic principles also influenced Brutus and Cassius, despite not being Stoics themselves, to end their lives following the Battle of Philippi. During the early empire, when corruption and excess were rampant, the court harbored a deep animosity towards philosophers, especially the Stoics. Their forthright criticism of the era's moral decay likely contributed to their unpopularity. As a result, several decrees were issued banishing them, and among those exiled was that limping slave who taught Arian in Nicopolis when Vespasian's cruel son purged Rome of its shame. The name of Epictetus resonates as a beacon of consolation in troubled times, for where can one find greater acceptance or sincere devotion than in his words? Dare to look up to God and say, "Deal with me as you will in the future. I am aligned with you. I am yours. I refuse nothing that pleases you. Lead me wherever you wish. Dress me as you choose. If you wish me to be a magistrate or a private citizen, to stay here or be in exile, to be poor or rich, I will justify these conditions to others." These were not mere platitudes, but were exemplified in the life of Epictetus. In this hobbled Stoic, the philosophy reached its pinnacle, but it was the imperial philosopher who, by broadening and humanizing its teachings, offered to the world through his meditations the gospel for those who eschew the supernatural. These meditations were not composed as a single work, and were likely never intended for public dissemination. Rather, they are the emperor's personal notes, reflecting his thoughts on temporal and eternal matters. This practice seems to have been a method for him to retreat inwardly, seeking inner peace. It is notable that Marcus Aurelius never neglects the importance of natural affection. Book Y is dedicated to expressing his gratitude to his parents, friends, and teachers for their beneficial guidance or example. For all other blessings not directly attributable to them, he simply gives thanks to the gods, without delving into their nature. This affectionate disposition is central to his interpretation of the Stoic concept of global citizenship. Marcus Aurelius truly feels a bond with all humanity. Humanity is governed by a common law, thus we must be fellow citizens and part of the same political entity. Consequently, the whole world is one commonwealth. A social nature is what humanity was primarily designed for. This sense of global brotherhood compels us to seek the common good and regard nothing as solely our own advantage. What benefits the entire hive is beneficial to each individual bee. It also leads us to empathize with and forgive our enemies. Since I have grasped the inherent beauty of a good deed and the ugliness of a bad one, and though we are not of the same flesh and blood, our minds are closely related, both emanating from the deity, I am convinced that no real injury can be done to me, because no one can compel me to act immorally. Hence, I cannot hate or be angry with someone of my own nature and kin. We are all meant to support each other, like feet, hands, and eyelids, or the rows of teeth. Marcus Aurelius often reflects on the impermanence and triviality of things. The vast continents of Europe and Asia are mere corners of creation. The ocean is a drop, and Mount Athos is but a grain in the grand scheme of the universe, while the present moment is but a fleeting point in eternity. All things are transient and mutable. We should adapt to observing the perpetual process of change, understanding that the universe itself suffers no harm. The death of one entity is the birth of another. Universal nature molds universal matter like wax. Initially, it may be a horse. Soon it will be melted down and reshaped into a tree, then a man, and so on. It remains in one form only briefly, just as a vessel feels no more pain when broken than when first constructed. Death and birth are both natural mysteries and somewhat similar, as the former merely dissolves what the latter had assembled. Amidst all this transformation, philosophy alone remains a true good, teaching us to keep our guiding principles pure and unaffected by physical experiences. No matter where you throw me, into any climate or state, despite all challenges, I will ensure that my divine essence remains content as long as it exists and operates in alignment with its nature. External influences cannot affect us unless we choose to label them as good or evil. This aligns with the Stoic belief that while all sensations impact the soul materially, it is the rational or guiding principle that determines their truth or moral value. Honor your faculty of judgment, for it alone can prevent your guiding principle from forming opinions that contradict nature or the proper function of a rational being. Do not consider yourself hurt, and your complaint will end. Stop complaining, and you will no longer be hurt, writes the emperor, using his characteristic method of practical wisdom to convey deeper truths. Marcus Aurelius's writings are replete with such practical advice, but he also reaches for higher philosophical insights. He echoes Antisthenes' observation about the royal prerogative. It is a royal thing to be praised for good deeds. He also critiques the desire for gratitude, aptly defined by a French writer as usury for our acts of kindness. Some people, when they do you a favor, immediately demand gratitude. Others, more subtle, remember the favor and consider you their debtor. A third type barely acknowledges their own actions. These resemble a vine that bears grapes without expecting thanks. A swift horse or a greyhound doesn't make a fuss after performing well, nor does a bee after producing honey. Similarly, a person who does a good deed does not broadcast it, but rather continues to act generously, like a vine that bears fruit again in the next season. We should emulate those who act with such kindness without dwelling on their own beneficence. His critique of the pretentious display of virtue is sharp. How affected and hollow does someone appear who declares, "I am determined to be straightforward with you." Listen, friend, why all this show? Let your actions speak for themselves. Your demeanor should attest to your words. Virtue should be as visibly apparent as love in the eyes of the beloved. I would have honesty and sincerity so integrated that they are perceptible to the senses. Another striking sentiment is, the most effective revenge is to not replicate the injury. Marcus Aurelius offers a profound perspective on prayer. One person prays to the gods to be freed from troubles. Let your prayer be that your mind never desires such relief. Another prays earnestly to avoid losing a loved one. Instead, I suggest you pray against the fear of losing them. Let this be the principle of your prayers. Although quoting from the Meditations is tempting, they are accessible to readers to explore on their own. We must briefly examine how Marcus Aurelius addresses major philosophical issues that every system must address or risk losing its claim to guide life. The problem of evil is a significant challenge for any philosophy, and it is a primary argument against the existence of an all-wise providence. The Stoics faced this challenge head-on and rejected the premise. They argued that the world is perfect and that what appears as evil is necessary for the greater good. Marcus Aurelius upholds this view, but cautions against excessive inquiry. If your cucumber tastes bitter, leave it. If brambles block your path, avoid them. Beyond this, do not question, why does the world have such things? A natural philosopher would laugh at such a question. It is as absurd as criticizing a carpenter for having sawdust or a tailor for having scraps. Epictetus remarked, "Just as a target is not set up to be missed, the nature of evil does not exist in the universe. There is no absolute evil, only what serves the greater good." Marcus Aurelius agrees. Wickedness generally causes no harm to the universe. It also harms no specific individual. Occasionally, he points to the existence of gods who must oversee all things for the best, though he does not assert this with certainty. The alternative between divine providence and chance exists, and while Marcus Aurelius leans towards the former, he demonstrates that a person can find contentment even if chance rules. Concerning an afterlife, he speaks with uncertainty. While he believes the guiding principle of the soul is immortal, as part of the deity, he does not extensively explore whether there is a future conscious existence. This life is our sole concern. Even if you were destined to live 3,000 years or 30,000, remember that no one can lose any life other than the one they are currently living, nor can they possess any life beyond this one they are losing. Unlike our modern poet who muses, "What is our failure here but a triumph's evidence for the fullness of the days? Have we withered or agonized? Why else was the pause prolonged but that singing might issue thence? Why rushed the discords in but that harmony might be prized?" The Stoic emperor draws a profound lesson from the fleeting nature of our existence. The teachings of the Meditations do not echo the sentiment of, "Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die," but rather advocate, "Let us use this life well, as we have no other." The solace for death must be found in the fulfillment of duty. If we have lived well, we should be content to face death, regardless of the number of our years. Epicurus advised his followers to leave life as a guest departing a feast, content with the meal. The Stoics, with a sterner tone, instruct us to exit the stage as an actor who has played his part. Listen, friend, you have been a citizen of this grand city. Whether you have lived here 5 years or 3 makes no difference. If you have abided by the city's laws, the length of your stay is irrelevant. If nature, which placed you here, decrees your departure, there is no injustice. You leave the stage as fairly as an actor who has been released by the master of the revels. But I have only played 3 acts, not reaching the 5th, you might say. Yet in life, 3 acts suffice to complete the play. The one who staged the first scene now signals the end of the last. You are accountable for neither the beginning nor the end. Therefore, depart contentedly, for the one who dismisses you is also content. Marcus Aurelius has attracted admirers from various perspectives. A notable example is Cardinal Francis Barberini, nephew of Pope Urban VIII, who spent his final years translating the emperor's thoughts into his native language to spread their enriching and invigorating essence among the faithful. Matthew Arnold, in his Essays in Criticism, clarifies the reason for this widespread admiration. It is remarkable how little of a merely local or temporary nature, how little of those obstacles a reader must clear away before accessing the core value, how little that is even subject to doubt and question. The morality of Marcus Aurelius presents. In general, the actions Marcus Aurelius prescribes are those that every sound nature must recognize as right, and the motives he provides are those that clear reason must validate. Thus he remains a special friend and comforter to all clear-headed, conscientious, yet pure and aspiring souls, particularly in ages that rely on sight rather than faith, and yet lack open vision. He may not provide all they yearn for, but he offers much, and what he offers can be received. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the content, please like, share, and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to Marcus Aurelius Antoninus for more great updates. See you next time.